Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Worth Your Time, Worth Your Money, an ongoing segment I do here where I have a look at the opening hours of new and upcoming games, and today we're having a look at Anno 117 Pax Romana. So, I've been playing this in pre-release. I've put about 6 or 7 hours into it, mostly campaign, a little bit of sandbox, but generally speaking more than I normally do for this sort of surface level video. This will be releasing against embargo. There's probably dudes out there that put 300 hours into it. That's not really my pace, as much as I am actually a fan still, despite a lot of the misgivings of Ubisoft, and I'm an Anno fan. I've played the last 3, I suppose, and I really enjoyed them. I'm still a normie at heart, right? I'm fairly surface level. So this video serves just to give you a broad idea of what you're getting into, if there's any red flags, and if it lives up to the hype. I think there's 2 main talking points to just cover off on. One, how Ubisoft is this Ubisoft game? And the answer to that is yes. And is this a good Anno game? Like mechanically, is it a successor? And I would say yes. Let's deal with the second one first, right? The mechanics, components, etc. Anno is like an ongoing series. It's been around forever. Like I said, I played probably the last 3. The 2 future ones, what were they, like 2205 and 2070? It always adds up to 9 by digits. So there you go, you learnt something from there. And then Anno 1800 after that. A lot of people argue that 1800 was kind of the peak of the series, and it's going to be very, very difficult for this to eclipse it or come even with that. And I agree with that sentiment. I think 1800 has an unfair advantage because through the course of that thematic setting, there's like a mid-game pivot where you kind of go hard industrial revolution. So you go from your more traditionalist, feeding fish to villagers and really basic needs. And by the end of it, you have like a society with electricity and trams and steelworks and all that. And I think it's very, very difficult to pull that thing off because of the unfair advantage of the actual time setting of 1800. So having said all that, 117 is great, but it doesn't have a magic pivot that I would say is the cornerstone of what made 1800 kind of unfairly good as far as Anno games go. So yeah, this is more the same Anno. It's beautiful. I haven't had any performance issues. These flourishing cities with all these villages going about their business. It's all got the Anno mechanics that you know and love. And for those not across it, like I said, I'm a normie. I've got a normie audience. You've probably come up against Anno-like mechanics in other pretenders. Or, I shouldn't say it like that, but you know what I mean. This game is the cornerstone of a lot of colony management mechanics. That being, you'll start with like a basic peasantry system. You'll feed them needs as required, like production chain needs, like fish, or, maybe they need clothes, and that has a multi-chained sheepfolds that transport the wool, from point A to point B, and then that in turn gets spun into clothes, and that gets delivered to a workshop, and it gets consumed by people. So it's like a real world representation, goods management, and a lot of it comes into the efficiency model of that. You want everything running at 100%. You're incentivized not to have it bottleneck for under or over production. That's actually kind of bigger in this as well because of all the production buildings giving area effect bonuses too. And then you also have services, things like taverns, right? A little bit more abstract. It's more about walking distance down the roads. So you min-max your little colony, you feed the tier 1 peasantry what they need, and once they're all ticked off, you can upgrade their house, and that will have, in turn, more needs upon that. And this builds up a social strata that gets more and more demanding. It'll, builders to engineers to scholars or something like that. And at the very top, it just becomes really brutal, honestly, but you need those dudes for the super specialized jobs. Anyway, this is the rule set, the game set of an Anno game laid out previously. It's all here. What they're really bringing to the table, the sort of 2 main gimmicks that they're bringing to the table mechanically is, one, they've fleshed out the combat. It's still pretty basic, but instead of just being seafaring battles and islands and vying for land control separated by sea, that's always been Anno. Now you have actual like foot troop ground forces. I'm pretty sure that hasn't come up before though. I'll be honest, I haven't played an Anno game in years. So there's a big focus on that. So it might look cool in the footage. You got these little platoons, these little auxilia, but mechanically it plays out much more like Settlers New Allies, which was a game that a lot of people disliked. I liked it, I enjoyed it, but as a Settlers game, the criticism was it's such a far cry, pun, from what a Settlers game is, that it was kind of almost unrecognizable. And I would agree with that. I enjoyed it. They probably should have called it something different. So they've taken a chunk of stuff that happened in there and they've put it in here, and that would be the RTS component, which in this, it's just, I build a couple of troops. There's a little light rock, paper, scissors, but you slam them against each other, and that's about it. It's not super complicated. Just because they move in those blocks doesn't mean it's going to be a total war game. It absolutely is not. So that's one of the sort of gimmicks that they bring to the table. The other one, which is going to have mixed reaction, is the way that the production chain buildings work is now that they're kind of 50-50 split in that, well, in my example, you provide fish or whatever to the villagers, and that ticks off the food component. Well, it's going to be a choice between two different things. In this case, it'll be fish or porridge. Now, either or will tick the food requirement. They only have a 1 out of 1. However, you can oversupply them with that, which will make their houses kind of super houses. They'll produce more stuff, more bonuses. But this means you have to produce double everything if you are someone that wants to do that, which I think most people attracted to this sort of game are going to want to do that. They're trying to make their perfect little utopia, which, becomes doubly frustrating because things like a tavern will be, well, it'll be a tavern and like a church or something, or a temple. So in order to get the most, let's say, out of your houses, is you're going to be trying to overlap twice as many overlap buildings onto them. Now, you could just accept defeat and just go one half of the equation, but I feel like a lot of people aren't going to do that. And in such, the zoning and the min-maxing becomes much more muddy. All of this is mixed in. I alluded to earlier that production buildings, like the place weaving the clothes for your dudes, that in turn actually generates an area of effect to all buildings. So not just houses, but also, woodcutters. It'll add 1 population to your workforce if the woodcutter is in radius of the weaver, and the same as if the houses are. So it's all getting really muddy. And like I said, I feel like some people that really want to try and min-max are either going to be overwhelmed by the fact that it's not that you can min-max everything perfectly, it's more that you're just going to have to pick which bonuses to go with. So that might drive some people mad. I think other people will embrace it. I think a more casual audience like me, I would say, don't mind. And it's kind of just cool that you can have this ramshackle melting pot of a city built upon itself. I don't think it's a malicious design choice to try and, attack the way that people build cities. I feel like it's an attempt to add more freedom to the formula. But I don't think it would be actually unfair to say that this also kind of represents a half step away from what the Anno systems are. Like, as soon as you start muddying it and adding options and variations and changes to an originally rigid system, what does the next Anno look like after this? Do they muddy it a bit more? At what point does Anno not look like Anno anymore? And then you have another Settlers New Allies on your hand. It's food for thought. Anyway, it's still fun. Your cities are beautiful. I love it to death. I'm really enjoying the game as an Anno enthusiast. Anno's back. But it doesn't eclipse 1800, and I think it's going to come down to personal taste whether or not this is the Anno for you. I'll cover off on quickly here at the end for those that are curious that have made it this far. How Ubisoft is this Ubisoft game? What I mean is, if you don't have your bloody eyes painted on, most people have been tracking the trajectory of Ubisoft over the past few years. And while I still enjoy their games, right? I'm still a holder. I liked Skull and Bones. I liked bloody Star Wars Outlaws, right? And I know I'm not allowed to like them. I'm told that that's bad, right? But I enjoyed them. I can't deny that they were fun. But I still saw the weird, almost fetishization in some cases of forcing some issues, some demographics. Like, I'm not blind to what's going on. And the strange kind of agenda that a lot of modern game development studios have, and Ubisoft is one of the tips of the spear, where they're kind of less interested in having a holistic, true to the period, self-contained, and kind of accurate experience, and they're more interested in almost like it being a modern game but wearing the theme, like in this case like a Roman toga, almost like as a Halloween costume over a modern person. I don't know how else to describe it. I try not to get into this rhetoric because it becomes battle lines, you're against us or them, black and white. I think there's grey, but I suppose my point is if you're expecting it to not be like that, then you're kind of lying to yourself. I don't think Ubisoft's going to hard pivot just yet. It sounds like they might be changing the structure of their companies for future releases. But, you know, I'll rattle off your talking points that you're probably curious about. Most of the cast are female. It's beyond a 50-50 split. In positions of power, it's all very, very strange. It doesn't faze me terribly. This has been a thing that we've seen in Civ games, etc. for so long. It is kind of, you know, as a bit of a chuckle and aside, they struggle so hard to meet a 50-50 quota between females and males as famous people from history in the Civ games that they really have to scrape to make that work, you know. I don't think there's anything wrong with just being a realist and understanding that for the majority of humankind, most, you know, military leaders have been fucking male. Like, I don't think this is wild news to anyone. I've already seen some rhetoric about there's like a Black Legionnaire captain that people got hung up on in the demos or whatever. That doesn't really faze me terribly much because at the end of the day, those guys did exist, to be honest. Rome conquered fucking everywhere, and they were pretty merit-based with their citizenry-based thing. You could become a Roman citizen and a citizen first through a lot of avenues. In fact, you could even, you know, earn your liberty as a slave and become part of the population through, like I said, merit, squirreling away money. Like, there were all sorts of avenues towards a kind of meritocratic utopia. But also, at the same time, this is Ubisoft. We know why that dude's there, and it's not because of any of those reasons I mentioned. It's because they're ticking quotas and performing for their bubble. But I don't think this is news to anyone, right? I don't really say this with any bias or agenda or any real personal investment, other than it's going to be what you expected it to be. So temper your expectations accordingly. The main campaign is a little bit like pulling nails to the point where I can't tell what's going on. You know, you have an Emperor Augusta get killed off fairly early, and he was discussing how he wanted to make his wife Empress. His daughter is sort of a main character. The game wants you to play as the female version of the two characters, and the male version is very metrosexual, very soft and gentle, and submits to everybody. And there's a huge fixation on the plight and the unfairness of slavery. And like I said, not through the lens of a Roman citizenry path to freedom that was available to some slaves. Like, don't get me wrong, slavery has always been awful. But the thing is, people in this time period, true to this time period, wouldn't be having these conversations of how unfair it is and talking to their slaves on first name basis, trying to understand their world viewpoint. You know, this is just modern dinner conversations of Western game studios being inserted into a theme that to them is nothing more than a fetishized wrapper that their game is wrapped in. Anyway, I'm not trying to go too hard or cruel or anything like that, but none of this should be news to anyone. That's my main point. You knew it was going to be like this, and either you're into it, and that's fine. You know, my friends across the pond, we're all gamers at the end of the day. I obviously have some misgivings against some modern rhetoric. That's fine. You might be all for it, but as soon as one of us starts throwing stones at each other, we both lose, right? So if you like that kind of stuff and you're all on board, good for you. This game's for you, my friend. But if you're against it and, you know, a little bit more cagey about the rewriting, almost iconoclasm of history periods, then, you know, you're probably not going to get this game already. Or if you were, you're going to bury your head in the sand and just play sandbox mode anyway. Anyway, look, I think I've fairly covered off on the main points that people are curious about. Shop around, check out some other reviews. It's a few days ahead, the embargo. I'm sure there's plenty of other people that have put even more time into it. I'd be curious who else wants to talk about the hot button issues that I talked about, but even then, I didn't want to spend too much time on them other than to say, of course they're here. It's an Ubisoft game. Don't lie to yourself. And just play games that you are going to enjoy regardless. Anyway, team, I just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.